My name is Charlie Bowman. I'm a retired biologist, cell biologist for several years now, and the interim director of the Western New York Peace Center in Buffalo, New York.
Yeah, what does that Peace Center do?
It does many things, and we have many task forces. We're into hydrofracking, anti-hydrofracking efforts. We're into Latin American issues. Our policy in Latin America is being scrutinized by our task force. We have a resist militarism task force that does a lot of anti-drone work. We have a prison action committee who's headed up by an expert on New York State prisons. He's been on the inside for some years. He's now out and actively engaged in the community and trying to raise awareness of the horrific conditions inside our New York State prisons. We have a global economic task force that interacts with other groups around Buffalo. And we have a local economic task force that tries to teach people on the east side of Buffalo about debt issues. Who's trying to raise awareness on how to deal with debt collectors and raise funds to purchase those debt. There's an organization called Jubilee which raises funds and then purchases the debt on a dime to the dollar and then gives the house back to the people who originally purchased the debt. So that's, and he's an expert on that because he works for a debt collection agency. So his heart is in the right place. And we also just formed a Middle East task force, and we're having our first event next Tuesday. So that's getting off the ground. So the members of the Peace Center do all the work, and we try to keep everybody's schedules not competing with each other or falling over each other, and that's a Herculean task sometimes. So,
well, the Buffalo area is a relatively, I guess, I wouldn't want to say economically depressed, but there has been a lot of loss of industry and jobs in this area, and so people in this part of the New York State are kind of hard up. Is that right?
Yeah, they're stressed. They're economically stressed, and that cuts across upstate New York and ends in Buffalo and even in the southern tier. Yeah, Buffalo is known for its steel industry, which sort of took off in the late 50s, early 60s as the seaway opened up, and they didn't have to stop, and the ore carriers did not have to stop and transfer their material to the trains and then take it down to New York City. So that was the primary driving force behind the economic decline.
When you say they took off, you mean they departed? They
departed, and because there's no reason to stop. I mean, the shipping and the Great Lakes shipping didn't have to stop in Buffalo anymore.
I see.
And coupled with that was the steel industry's decision to move overseas, and they came on each other's tails. I don't know quite who went first. That's a bit of a fog. But I've always been puzzled about that because there's a burgeoning steel industry in Hamilton, Ontario, just 30 miles from Buffalo, that always has been there and did not move. And I've always been puzzled about the policy that the steel plant owners that they made to stay and not go to China, and versus the steel plant owners in Buffalo who decided to go. And there's a story that needs to be told there, and I'm always trying to find someone to tell it.
Now, this area that we're in also at one time was important for the production of atomic bomb. Is that right?
Yeah, that's one of the first metallurgical and chemical paraphernalia to build the bomb. The knowledge on how to work with the detailed knowledge on how to work with the metals was there. I mean, Niagara Falls supplied cheap energy, and so the chemical companies and metallurgical companies descended upon Niagara Falls in the 30s, and so they were the first go-to people to figure out how to make the bomb. And so they isolated lots of uranium, enriched uranium. We got plutonium. We got the world supply of radium in Niagara Falls, in Lewiston, New York. We got over half the world's supply of radium sitting in there. And the half-life of that particular flavor of radium is I think around 1,600 years. So it's going to be around for a long time.
So there's quite a, I mean, people have heard of Love Canal, I think, a lot, and that is in this area. But isn't it true that there's a very substantial problem of toxic waste and pollution up all through this area?
Absolutely. There's been a recent report that just came out that's just been finalized about that, and a number of environmental groups around Buffalo were involved in putting this together. And I was glad to see the Buffalo News headline it here in the last few days. And yeah, we have EPA Superfund sites. We have twice the number on average of any other county in New York State. They're sprinkled around New York State. You know, every county has some apparently, and but we have a high density of them out there in Niagara County and in Erie County, and it's a result of this war effort that you know, the decision to make the bomb during World War II is the cleanup from that hasn't even begun yet. I mean, it's that radioactive material has seeped into the groundwater and has headed out towards Niagara River and Lake Ontario. About, I think in the late 88, early 90s, Environment Canada, which is the EPA of Canada, discovered plutonium at the mouth of at the terminus of the Niagara River. And there was a great puzzle on where that plutonium came from. And some people thought it came from West Valley, which is about 30 miles south of Buffalo. Or other people think it came from the Lake Ontario Ordnance Work. My guess is that it probably came from the closest source of plutonium, and so if that's the case, then the radioactivity has been in the groundwater for many years now. So we're very pleased to see the mainstream newspaper finally discovering this after 20 years. So.
Well, we're here this afternoon to discuss a project that you have designed, really, for alternative energy. And this would be done in an area where people are very stressed economically, but they're also under a lot of stress from this leftovers of these wars. And how do you see what you're doing now relating to this in any way?
Well, I think the world needs to immediately, I stress immediately, to begin switching to renewable energy in order to keep economic growth going. Because we're producing greenhouse gases through fossil fuel burning, through coal, through oil, through methane, burning natural gas. All of these processes increase CO2. The methane ones increases the methane also, which is actually a worse greenhouse gas than CO2. But in order to get those energy sources, which are, in a way, they're quite useful, but in order to get them, we have to destroy the earth. I mean, we have to dig holes deep in the ground, or we have to remove mountaintops, or we're now getting oil from shale. Some shale deposits have oil. And the Middle East. And our culture, our economy is so dependent upon oil that you know, our presidents have tasked the military to protect the sources, the sea lanes, to keep the oil flowing to the United States. I think one of your previous interview said it began with President Carter. And that's been underscored by Reagan, Bush, and Clinton, and certainly Bush too, and Obama. So this has we have to stop doing this because it is destroying the world, the environment for human beings in the world. It's going to foster climate instability. We don't know how the climate outside this home, for example, is going to change in 10 years. Will the rain be more or less? It could be both. I mean, it could be, one or the other. So, in every microcosm of the world, that question is being asked right now. And when food capabilities stop, the food growing capabilities become affected, you'll see migration of mass numbers of people to their neighbors or whatever, and that will cause lots of war. I mean, and so the Peace Center is involved in this. So I mean, renewable energy, solving renewable energy, and bringing peace to the world are two sides of the same coin.
Now, this project will be taking place in two places in this area. One of them is at a National Guard air base.
Right.
And as I understand it, Reaper drones would be flown out of there under a plan that's now in progress.
It's not clear that Reaper drones will be stationed there as of today. However, they do want the air base capability. So certainly that's, if that's not number one on their list, it's probably number two. So. And
there's a big thing that in the newspaper, in the television that I read about the drone base, that it would help keep jobs here, that it would restore jobs, or keep Air Force jobs. But what you're proposing now, maybe you should describe what would be the particulars of it and what would be the job benefits of it. Well, why don't you just tell what tell the plan.
The plan is to build two gigantic, and I underscore gigantic, solar arrays in Niagara County.
When we say solar arrays, what does that mean?
Solar arrays are devices which take sunlight and make it into electricity. Okay. We need electricity, and right now we get our electricity from coal, oil, and natural gas, and some wind. Wind is now at parity with coal and oil. So wind is very, very important, but wind can only be used in certain locations, and the locations that we're talking about right now are not suitable for wind generation. And so the other option is to mount these solar panels, which are essentially they take beach sand and silicon and dope them with certain agents to make them semiconductors, phosphorus or boron and so forth. And that creates the conditions for sunlight, for photons to come in to the solar panels. And 15% of that, or 12% of that energy, is used to make electricity. The other 85% goes into heating up the solar panel. So even at that low conversion rate, it is still economically viable to do this, because we're not raping the earth to get beach sand. Beach sand is a very plentiful thing. So we propose to have a total of 2,200 acres of solar panels in Lewiston, New York, and Niagara Falls Air Base, and this will generate be about 490 megawatts of power, and it would increase the green energy coming out of the Niagara Power Project by about 20%. So it's a very significant number.
And how many homes would that handle in this area? You know, what percentage of the number of houses?
Okay, I'll sketch it out of my brain. I didn't make the calculation, but roughly 25% of the homes in Erie and Niagara County could be taken care of. But they also sell that power to corporations that bring in jobs too. So, and they make a big point of that. So that could help also help bring in jobs to that area. Niagara Falls, instead of being known as the waste dump of our industrial waste dump of our quote unquote progress, could be known as the green energy capital. The combined project would be, I think, the second largest solar array, if we take them together, the second largest solar array in the United States. So
Really?
yeah, it would rival some that are being built in Arizona and California. So it's a big project, and I always get the criticism that, well, the sun never shines in New York State. Okay, we don't have enough sunshine. I just point them to Germany. In the former East Germany, they have lots of solar farms up there. They get, I think, 10 or 15% less sunlight than the darkest areas of New York State. So,
really?
So Germany has gone big time on solar generation as well as wind, and if you look at the spot price of electrical energy in Germany, they sell it every hour. Like New York State, they put it up to bid every hour, and they make a prediction what the next hour is going to be. In Germany, in the summertime, as the sun rises, the price of energy goes up, and then as the sun keeps going up, then the solar rays come in, and the price goes down because they have to buy the energy from the solar rays over their coal plant. Okay, so the solar rays get the first feed in. Okay, the wind gets the first feed in. You know, if the wind isn't blowing, then the solar will get it. But the solar and wind have first dibs on each hour of selling. Okay, so as the sun rises in Germany, you can see the price of electricity come down. It comes down to the 3 a.m. price when everybody's sleeping in their bed, and then as the sun goes down, the price goes up again, and then comes down again. So solar energy in Germany is a huge effect, and all the farmers love it. Every farm has some kind of solar thing on their roof and so forth. Yeah, no, it's a huge. They did a big thing on the feed-in tariff years ago, and it's helped their economy. They didn't have to lay off as many people during the crash and a few years ago. And
why is that?
Well, they have jobs. I mean,
in other words, that energy is less subject to fluctuation than oil.
You can't. The photons falling in his backyard will be the same price as the photons falling in your backyard.
Right.
And they can't. You can't put an embargo on someone's photons. So.
Right.
We don't have to remove mountaintops. We don't have to ship oil overseas. We don't have to keep sea lanes open.
Well, how many jobs do you think this would make in this area?
In Niagara Falls area, it would probably do 130, 140 long-term jobs. Okay, both arrays. That's the construction would do up to 1,000, 1,100.
How long would that take?
Roughly 2 years.
So that would be quite a huge.
It would be a huge impact to Niagara County and to Erie County.
Yeah, and it would also mean maybe lower electricity prices.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the New York Power Authority could offer that to the citizenry that's already stressed out economically.
Yeah.
They could offer people deciding to move into the area. They could give them free energy for 5 years. You could give. I mean, you could, begin thinking about these kinds of things.
Because I remember I used to be part of a group that ran a cafe, and our cost for our coolers and refrigerators exceeded the cost of our rent.
Yeah, I believe it.
And so this would be...
That would be huge for small business development. I mean, I'm not a small businessman, but just judging from your comments, that would be a huge impact.
Do you think that people in this area are aware of the potential benefits from this that you're speaking of?
I think in general they are. We've been
I mean the general public.
The general public are vaguely aware that it is a good idea. From my travels around Buffalo, when I lobbied Senator Schumer's office on this last year, the guard at the door said, what are you going to do? And I said, well, I got the solar array thing. Oh, really? You got a solar array project? And he and I got talking about it, and he was very proactive about it. At the same time, he didn't know, when I showed him my thumb drive going through the security, and he didn't know what a thumb drive looked like. So, but anyway, he knew what solar energy was. And just the other night, I was interacting, buying something in the store, and I was talking about the clerk, and we got talking about the solar array project. That, oh, I grew up next to the Niagara Falls Air Base, and that would be a great idea. Great to put the solar array up there. And she was sort of came from a military family. So I think just on the random communication with the general public, I've always gotten a lot of good comments on it.
So how much would this cost?
It would cost let me look at my figures, 1.18 billion for one version of it, and 1.22 for another version. Okay. So it's a lot of money. Where do we get $1 billion? There's several ways of doing this. My favorite funding mechanism is called the New York State transfer tax. Last year, New York State gave $14 billion back to Wall Street just on the sale of the buying and selling stocks. New York State charges a penny or so. There's very depending upon the price of the stock for the transaction. So if you buy a share of ExxonMobil or something, or a share of a solar energy company, you pay a half a cent or a cent or whatever. That gets sent to Albany. At the end of the day, that gets sent back to a Wall Street firm. They fill out a form with the tax department. They get their money back. There's so much activity going on. That penny a share or a quarter penny, depending whatever. There's so much volume. There is so much volume going on in Wall Street that last year New York State said, here's in effect said here's a check for $14 billion. Last year the sales tax was less than that. If they decided to keep the stock transfer tax and give and cancel the sales tax in New York State, they would earn more money. But anyways, my favorite finding would be to take a few hours worth every year. Suppose they borrowed. There's 890. It was 283 million for the Niagara Falls Air Base. Suppose they borrowed 283 million. The interest payments would be roughly 20 million.
You're saying that the project that would be on the air base would cost
283 million. Okay. For the cheapest version. And suppose they borrowed the entire sum, a ridiculous assumption, but let's make the assumption. The interest payments would be 20 million. Where would they get? New York State would get 20 million. They could take a few hours worth of stock transfer tax a year, a few hours, okay, and pay the interest cost every year. Right. So they just, please Wall Street, give us a few hours worth of your money, and we can have a beautiful solar array in Niagara Falls Air Base.
What about federal money?
Well, I haven't looked at the sources of federal money on this. My personal opinion is I would like New York State to operate it as somewhat as an authority, like the Thruway Authority.
And keep it in
and keep the cash, and then let it keep it an open system where there's some accountability. Right. If they can turn it over to a private company, we will not know how many cents per kilowatt hours they're paying and so forth.
Are there other air bases around the country? I mean, are there other? Where could this be done elsewhere? I mean,
obviously Southern California, Arizona. There's the military, the Pentagon owns roughly 30 million acres in the United States.
How many?
30 million, okay. How can you visualize 30 million? Well, I was playing around with the figures last night, and 30 million acres is roughly the size of New York State, okay. So think of New York State, and the Pentagon owns New York State. Well,
all right.
Maybe there's a joke there, but anyways, a lot of that is in sunny areas, you know, where really economically, you know, where they get their money back soon. So there are studies going on in military bases in Southern California to take some of, you know, evaluate some of that area to see if solar or wind would be appropriate. I haven't looked in detail closely at that, but there are some studies around on that. And we should, I mean, the Pentagon should be thinking about the costs of energy too, and so they should be thinking about turning their bases into green energy and sharing it with the community. I mean, you know, maybe that would be an appropriate way to go too. But my favorite way would be to keep New York State to own this thing. Right. And I didn't get to the second source of funding, which is also possible. New York State Power Authority has according to their 2012 annual report, they have 1.8 billion sitting in the bank. So they could take, 20% of that and certainly buy it outright and operate it outright just like that. So they can, there's no problem with that, you know, spending the money on that, and it wouldn't even hit their bank account very severely. They earn roughly 200 to 300 million in profit. They earn 200 to 300 million a year. It's a huge cash cow for New York State. So they could fund the Niagara Falls Air Base project. They have the check to do it, and all it needs is a signature. Right now. Right now. Yeah. No one has to borrow anything, and then they can sell that electricity back to the general public for 6 or 7 cents a kilowatt hour. What's standing in the way of this right now? Educate, you know, we have to inform the public about this, and it's just getting the word out. I mean, we have to get the word out and have the debate about this. I wasn't aware of the New York State Power Authority up until a few weeks ago. I wasn't aware that they had that much money, but our local congressman informed me that they did after I presented the proposal to them, and so that a light bulb went off in my head. I wonder if that's true around the country. Well, New York State is unique. Has the stock market. You know, I mean, it's. I mean, in terms of the electric power authorities having sitting on a huge pile of cash. New York State Power Authority generates a lot of that cash out of green energy. You know, so we have. Buffalo and Niagara counties are Buffalo and I mean Niagara Falls is the green energy capital, you know, of the states. Basically, it's a huge amount of coming out of there. You're saying coming out of the falls? Coming out of the falls, right. And this project would increase it by 20%. I mean, it would be terrific. Do other states have this? What their authorities have? I do not know. I don't know the answer to that, but. Do they have the water supplies of New York State? No, New York State has beautiful water supply. Right. It has underground, on the surface, rapidly flowing, and big cliffs at Niagara Falls. And so we are unique. New York State is a very, very, very unique state among all the states. Texas is spending big bucks making desalination plants. Many of their aquifers in Texas have high salt content. So, but they have to dig out the water to supply their citizenry. So they're spending lots of their energy, their fossil fuels. Doing this, and it's we don't have to do that. I mean, we can just sink a well, as long as we can keep the hydrofractors out of here, keep it from polluting. So, anyways. Now, it's also true that the Power Authority is kind
kind of ingrained in the way they do things, right? And so I understand you're going to be going and making a presentation at a meeting that they're going to have tomorrow. And they didn't really say, gee whiz, this is great, Charlie. Come on in and show us, right? What's the process that is leading toward your visit there tomorrow?
I called them up several weeks ago at a member of the Sierra Club, the Niagara section of the Sierra Club. It's in Western New York. Is very, very supportive of this project, and so he's a weather expert. He's a weatherman. He earns his money by predicting weather. So he normally goes up there every year, and but last fall he and his colleagues did a weather study based. We told them that we wanted to build this array, and they said, well, let's do figure out where the sunniest area in Western New York is. And it turns out, after they wrote a 25-page addendum, which will be included in the new release of the proposal soon, I hope, and they concluded that after 25 pages that Niagara Falls and Lewiston were the sunniest areas in Western New York. Mm-hmm. They did all this meteorological studies and so evaluations. And it's the best place in Western New York to build these arrays. And so they also told me about Earth Day celebration at the Power Authority, which is tomorrow. And they said call up and make a presentation, get permission to make a presentation. So I did, and 2 weeks later they got back to me and said, sorry, we do not give you permission to tell this. And I said, why? He said, do you realize what you're doing? You want to build an array on top of our reservoir. So I said, well, yeah, okay, and no, thank you, but we're thinking about, we think solar energy is important, and we're doing work on it. Goodbye. Mm-hmm. So I got back to the person who did the study, and he said, well, come on up and show your stuff in my booth. And that's what we'll try tomorrow. And I released I sent a press release to all the news organizations around, from Rochester to Buffalo. And I said, I just told them what I told you. I said, we will attempt to educate the public about the solar array issue, and we will see what happens tomorrow. So, do
you think the fact you want to have something on this air base is also a problem for them?
Well, we're a Western New York Peace Center, and we're anti-war, and that is, I think that's very, very troubling in many institutions. They may strongly support the goal of the solar array. But coming from a Western New York Peace Center, it may make them feel uncomfortable. Mm-hmm. And perhaps that's what the New York Power Authority is feeling. Mm-hmm. And but that's speculation. Perhaps it's like religion. You don't want to talk about anti-war too much. I have friends who've been kicked out of the church, several different churches in Western New York by raising their voice against the Iraq War. So there's an institutional thing that perhaps it's a bit of a problem for some people, but the idea is of going to renewable energy big time is we have to do it. Since 1650. I just ran across this. There's a wonderful blog called Do the Math, run by Tom Murphy, and he calculated he's a physicist, so he's a scientist looking at this. Since 1650 up to 1970, we've been using energy, increasing our energy growth every year by roughly 2.9%. And around 1970, 71, it began to turn over, began to just shift over. And it's in that shift, we're still in that shift. We're talking about 300, years or so. So it's still in that shift, and they don't know why that's happening. So it's you know, is it peak oil? You know, maybe we seem to be finding new oil.
But explain what you mean by that shift.
It's going down. It's not 2.9 anymore. It's 2.1 or 2.2 or so it's beginning to bend over. We're not growing. We're not using energy as increasing our use of energy as fast as we did in the past.
In this country.
In this country.
Right.
So there's a big puzzle about that. So I forgot what your original question was. I was getting up to it, but
well, I think that what we're talking about here, and you're talking about this, I guess you'd say escalator up in terms of constantly using more energy.
Yeah.
And when we started out in this interview, I think that what we're saying still is that this is a matter of war and peace.
Yeah.
This energy thing.
Right. It is.
Is that correct?
That is absolutely correct. And one of the biggest subsidies to the energy companies, ExxonMobil and BP and so forth, is the military spending, because they are charged with keeping the sea lanes open and keeping foreign governments friendly to negotiating access to oil fields. Once we go to solar or renewable energy, that's superfluous. I mean, so there's a huge pushback in this country, not pushback, but inertia. I'll call it inertia at this point, against doing this. There's a heck of a lot of jobs involved. There's a lot of retirement income invested in ExxonMobil. It's a very wealthy company.
Right. So that when you talk about this slight reduction in the use of energy, you're really not talking about a reversal.
No, it's still going up
in this case. And so what you're saying is that there are many people benefiting from the status quo of the energy use.
Yeah,
and what you're proposing would give them some kind of agita.
Yes, I mean that what do you do how do you tell ExxonMobil that they have to leave their resources underground so that we don't destroy human life on Earth? How do you say that?
How do you say that?
I don't know. I just said it, but I do.
But that's what you said. In other words, we have to leave this oil underground, or we're going to destroy life on Earth.
We have to leave the mountaintops intact in West Virginia. We have to not risk polluting our aquifers in New York State. God knows what's going to happen in Pennsylvania. We don't have to rape the Earth anymore. The technology has come around. They built the first solar cell in 1955. I think it cost $200,000 for a watt or something like that. And the space race, they needed them in the space race, so the cost wasn't involved. So they developed all that technology, and now it's quite relatively, to that, it's infinitely cheap. So, it's the ultimate source of quote unquote what we burn is no longer needs help from the military. That and our culture is military. I mean, our economy is military. Our industrial policy is military. Right. This renewable energy faces a lot of barriers. I can't think of anything that is more that there is more. I can't think of a higher energy barrier to overcome than the combined forces of the Pentagon and our entire our war culture and our Wall Street culture. They are married together on this issue, and renewable energy will divorce them. So I mean it's a huge problem, and so renewable energy and peace are. You spell peace with renewable energy. I mean, that's how you spell PEACE, renewable energy. Right. So, I don't know. We absolutely have to do this. And I think the general public, as I just mentioned in my random collisions with people in Buffalo, that understand it. So,
So, I mean, we're sitting here and talking in easy chairs, right?
Right.
But I think you're feeling some kind of urgency about what you're doing based on the military part of it.
Yeah.
As well as the climate part of it.
Right, exactly. I mean, it's. I didn't describe how we came about with this. I don't think. I don't remember. But anyway, I was
going to ask you that.
Yeah. How did this come around? And the Peace Center has been actively supporting the effort, the anti-drone efforts in Syracuse, New York, the wonderful work of the Syracuse Peace Council, and the upstate coalition to ban the drones, ground the drones. We've been heavily involved in that for the last few years, and we're going to remain involved in that. And so that's how I became aware of the drone issue. And last year, almost exactly a year ago, the Buffalo News editorially said that since the Niagara Falls Air Base has been threatened to be closed now. Actually, it's been threatened to be closed 3 times now in the last 15 years. And the first was the mid-'90s, and there's two efforts in the past 7 years. And so there's the thinking inside of some parts of the Pentagon is that we don't really need the Niagara Falls Air Base, right, even though it's sitting on the border. We don't have to protect ourselves from the single-payer healthcare system coming in from Canada. Anyways, so military people want to shut it down, and the local Congress people fight tooth and nail to keep it open. Right. And they won. They keep winning. And so the new thinking is the drones, and that's the Buffalo News said we should bring in drones, and that will give us jobs. So I got to thinking that we need to repurpose that base in another way. We have to change the thinking. Yeah. And I've always been interested in solar energy. I've never really studied it in any detail, but I've always read the general literature. And so I said, they have no trees. It's a brown field. There's radioactive hotspots on there. There's chemical hotspots on there. Businesses are not going to go in there easily. They're not going to be able to sell it. I mean, the cleanup would be, So, that'd be a perfect place for a solar farm. There's no trees. Keep the airport open, and just put the solar array on the military side of the base, and take some private farmland, which is adjacent to it. Right. And so that was the genesis of the project. And I've been learning about solar energy, learning about the engineering aspects of it for teaching it myself, and also some people who are members of the Sierra Club in Buffalo have given me a big hand. I want to acknowledge Walter Simpson, who used to lead the Peace Center years ago, and he's a widely known solar energy expert and renewable energy expert, and he pointed me in the right direction, and so I've been reading about it ever since then. Right. So,
if you would have a message for other anti-war organizers around the country based on your experience, what would it be?
Think about your local military base, and it's very easily to calculate how much solar energy is available on your to repurpose your local military base. And I was looking at the Seneca Army Depot, between Cayuga and Seneca Lakes. They have roughly 9,000 acres there. There's a plan that's just published recently by Mark Jacobson and his colleagues in Stanford and Cornell University, put together a proposal to make New York State electrical generation totally renewable from wind. Half of it comes from wind, 40% of it comes from solar. They also get 41,000 megawatts from solar farms, such as the Niagara Falls project that we're doing. The Niagara Falls and Lewiston projects would be 1% of that, okay? The Seneca Army Depot would be 5% of that. So if we put solar arrays on the Seneca Army Depot and the Niagara Falls Air Base, we'd be up to 6% of their proposal to help New York State make that transition. And Hancock Field would generate something around 80 or 90 megawatts.
That's near Syracuse.
That's near Syracuse, and that's where they're controlling drones from now. So if the local community were able to convince their leaders to put a solar array on their Hancock Field, they could generate 80% of the power that the Niagara Falls Air Base could generate. So I mean, this story could be repeated over and over and over and over again. And actually, the new proposal will have a section on how to design your neighboring solar farm. So I sort of worked out the details on that, and the National Renewable Energy Laboratory has published lots of tools on to use to design those kinds of things, but they didn't put it together in a, the experts who really know things don't know how to teach very well. So, so from my perspective of a neophyte coming in, I'll write up something on how to think about that.
What's that called? The
National Renewable Energy Laboratory, NREL, nrel.gov, and
that's in Colorado.
I don't know where it is. I don't know where their offices are, but they're on the web.
Okay.
And they have lots and lots and lots of wonderful material. And the sunshine, I mean, the worst place in the United States to do this is outside of, on the Pacific coast, around Washington, right on the coast. And the best place,
Seattle
is, those where they get lots of clouds. And those places even get more sun than Germany. I mean, so. Wow. So the best place would be Arizona and so forth. But the amount of sun is only, between those two places, only varies by a factor of 2, So, so for the same power, they'd have to build something half, So it's just an area problem. It's not a technological problem.
Right.
So it's important to know that the sunshine does work in New York State, and a lot of people around Buffalo have put solar panels on their roofs, and there's probably about 100 houses in the Buffalo area that now have it on. So.
Do you have anything? I think that you've covered a lot here, and I think it's information that a lot of people would not really immediately know how to handle. I think your background in science and everything is a very important thing, but do you feel that anybody could, once they dig into this, begin to work on it in their neighborhood?
Absolutely. No, I have no doubt about that. It's not that difficult. It's not that difficult at all. And the new proposal will have 1, 2, A, B, C, D.
Yeah. Where would people get hold of that?
That would be on wnypeace.org. That will be on there. So wnypeace.org.
Sounds like a radio station.
Well, I wish we had a radio station, but no, we have a website, and the current version of the proposal is dated October 4th, and the new one will be hopefully dated May or June.
Is there anything else that we haven't covered that you'd like to conclude with?
Yeah, I mean, we have to repurpose our military bases for green energy. They are largely treeless, polluted areas, okay? We have to take care of the pollution to protect it from entering the groundwater. That's failed. That's already happened in many areas. And so it's just land there, sitting there. We don't have to chop down many trees, particularly at the Niagara Falls Air Base. And so why not evaluate it for wind or solar, and then choose the appropriate generation mechanisms and share that with the local community. If we could have 10 or 20 million acres of from our military bases of green energy generation, it would be a huge economic impact on this country. I mean,
when we're talking about economic benefit, related to the solar energy development of the air base, there's a situation that we were discussing, outside the interview, where it seems that Ontario, which is right across the river falls, is benefiting greatly from people in all the houses on their electric bill paying, a small amount of money extra for green energy, for solar energy. And can you tell us specifically how that's working? Because it seems as though what we're in a situation of is, where do we go to put as much resources into this, green project as we can right now? And you talked about Wall Street, you talked about other kinds of funding sources. But I think this is a particularly interesting thing because there are individual people who can be part of that in this way.
Exactly. I mean, the entire population can be part of the green energy movement, which will have to be. I mean, the economic machine in Ontario, Canada, in Germany, and Norway, and Denmark, and all through Europe and Japan is called the feed-in tariff, the feed-in tariff. Also in Long Island, New York, they have a feed-in tariff, which created the Long Island Solar Array, generating 37 megawatts on Brookhaven National Laboratory. That's going gangbusters now, and that survived Hurricane Sandy very well. I think the fence was knocked down or something. I mean, but anyways, they didn't have to turn off, like some nuclear power plants when Hurricane Sandy came up. Anyways, it's called the economic machine that creates the economic environment for investment to come into a local area is called a feed-in tariff. It's very, very important for New York State residents, for residents of every state of this country to yell at their legislators to get this thing going, to have the debate should be about how much we pay for solar energy or whatever. That's where the debate should be, not whether we should not do this or not, but we have to get this going.
So the tariff is what? Just like an increment that's tacked onto their electric bill?
That's added on the electric bill. And the equivalent is a one Dunkin' Donut a month. Okay, that's, I think a lot of people can afford that. And that's happening in Ontario, Canada right now. And as a result of that, there was a consortium of Asian companies that came in and they dumped something like $15 billion. I'm a little bit fuzzy on that. $10 to $20 billion of money into Ontario, Canada, where they have expensive labor, Why did they do that? They could have gone to China. China has cheap labor. They decided to dump $10 to $20 billion into Ontario. And the question is, why did they decide to do this thing, to bring jobs to Ontario? The answer is the Ontario government created this feed-in tariff in 2009, and it's attracting billions of dollars worth of investment from foreign countries. As a result, they have $20,000 to $30,000 Canadian jobs supporting the production of solar panels, the production of wind generation, the production of all the various components surrounding that need to be connected together to get the renewable energy going. The question I always ask our local representatives, why didn't that money come into New York State? And the answer is we don't have a feed-in tariff. So there's a huge amount of effort going on in Ontario. We can't get the Buffalo News to report on this. I've written them an article or two, and members of the Sierra Club have tried to awaken the Buffalo News on this, and they refuse to cover it.
Do you have any idea why?
No, I don't. I think it's not like the information is hard to find. All I have to do is use Google.
Yes.
And there's lots of Canadian newspapers reporting on it. So
So you're saying those jobs could be here in New
Those
York?
jobs could be in Buffalo, New York, or Syracuse, New York, or Rochester. I love visiting Canada, but
Yeah.
you know, they could have been here, and we can't awaken our legislature or our governor to this issue. We need to be writing the governor on this. The governor can sign the feed-in tariff immediately. It could be tomorrow that it begins.
Yep.
He doesn't need the legislature.
And this could help finance building these arrays too.
This would exactly. I mean, this would help bring companies to build the components for the arrays. It would need 1 million. I forget what the figures are now, but over 1 million solar panels.
Right. And these are not Dunkin' Donut jobs,
These
right?
are not Dunkin' Donut jobs. They're $30,000, $40,000 a year jobs. And they could be made in Niagara Falls, New York. Could be made in Buffalo, Lackawanna, New York. Why not? You know, I mean, it's a no-brainer. We have to do this green.
They might even be more than that, actually. They might, you know, annual income for a technology job, I think.
Yeah. It is the feed-in tariff is a very, very, very important thing to get going here. We really, it's been used around the world to begin the transition to renewable energy, and it's a great puzzle to me why it's not being done here.
Right. Okay.